We're the Northern Folk, and this is Heavy Hearts.
Well, I'm not sure what love is, but I'm sure of what it's not. And I saw myself in that light all too often. But with age, my rage met rationale, and the little that I forgot has left a little space for me to soften. And I lived in isolation there in the middle of that queue, with folks waiting for someone kind they can cling on to. Still I took none too kindly to the short straws that I drew, that I thought more of you than any other. And heavy hearts are hard to keep afloat, can't be unbroken, just barely covered. Heavy hearts are hard to keep afloat. Brow in the dark of my demeanor, in all the ways I let you down, in the way I blow the candle out before I start to scowl, and how I stoop more than I stand. Heavy hearts are hard to keep afloat, can't be unbroken, just ask my mother. Heavy hearts are hard to keep afloat. Thought the overthinkers, or at least I thought I did, and I outdrank the overdrinkers I looked up to as a kid, and I brought up every sin that my upbringing had forbid, and I learned how fondness fades when left neglected. Well, I think the best in me still sitting back in Aubrey on that swing, just waiting for the best years of my life to kick in. And it may just be a day away that I learn how to swim, but I am cynical enough not to expect it. Heavy hearts are hard to keep afloat, can't be unbroken, you just cope and you cover. Heavy hearts are hard to keep afloat. Heavy hearts are hard to keep afloat, can't be unbroken, just ask my mother. Heavy hearts are hard to keep afloat.
Hello and welcome to Winter Solstice. That was Northern Folk that you just heard from, which is comprised of Paul, Georgie, Jaden, Alex, Ren and Kale. Now normally they have about 9 in their group, which is far too many for a dinner party, but I think 6 is about an operable number and it's great to have them back together for Winter Solstice number 8. And we'll hear a little more from Northern Folk a little later in the show. And if you'd like to know more about Northern Folk, check out their website, and their third album, in fact, is called Watermark. And a landmark, in fact, for Winter Solstice, it is number 8 for us. My name is David Astle, and I have been a lifelong friend of Winter Solstice, and I know that many people who are listening tonight are also great supporters of the event. Welcome to you, and also to new listeners and new audience members. So what is Winter Solstice? It's probably best summarised as normally we get together in an Albury Square, which is like a Frigidaire, but tonight things are toasty and warm on a Facebook platform for reasons obviously of COVID and restrictions and lockdowns, but all the more reason to make this an event that can have a wider audience and an event that can be in perpetuity, an evening where we all come together under the banner of mental health and suicide prevention, where we support each other, we support those who have been affected by suicide, and also hear from some keynote speakers and performers who have insights and perspectives on issues of mental health, both from lived experience and from the professional field as well. So plenty to look forward to. I'm looking forward to being your host and reading your comments as well. So let us know what you're up to. Send us a photo if you like. Have you got the glue vine happening? The pumpkin soups? Send us a comment. We'd love to hear from you, and I'll read a few comments as we go through the night. It will be about an hour and about 15 minutes, but some keynote speakers of some extraordinary talent and some singers, I have to say, that I am huge fans of. So you are in for a real treat tonight. To get things started officially, it's now my pleasure to introduce 3 performers, in fact, and I'll introduce them as a block. The first is lifelong supporters of Winter Solstice, and that's the Scots School Pipe Band, who will be performing a very appropriate song on this longest night. It's about 9.5 hours, the Winter Solstice night. The song that they will be performing is called Dawning of the Day, and followed by the Scots School, it will be Darren Whiten, who is a Wiradjuri man from Condobolin, and Darren will be welcoming us to country. And in fact, we do recognise that we are on Aboriginal land, and it has always been Aboriginal land whose sovereignty has not been ceded. And Darren is not just a Aboriginal elder and cultural performer, he's also a sculptor, and you may know his work for those who live in the Albury area. It's a beautiful totem pole is the nickname for that statue. It's called the Rain Gauge, and it stands right beside Milawa Billa, which is the Aboriginal name for the Murray River. And the third speaker, performer of the 3 you're about to hear is Albury's own Father Peter McLeod Miller, who will share something of a secular prayer, because Peter is a little less orthodox than most priests. He's a wonderful speaker and a beautiful soul. He's the rector of the Albury St Matthew's Anglican, and he will be telling us about the miraculous powers of hope and forgiveness. So the Scots School Pipe Band, Darren Whiten, welcome to country, and then Father Peter McLeod Miller.
Darren Whiten here to do the Welcome to Country, and we'd just like to welcome you all on this virtual Winter Solstice 2020. One of the special Radri teaching words that we have that's in the song is Yinjamara. Yinjamara means to honour and respect, to be patient and kind, and to go slow. And I think that's a really good message for all of us at this time of the year, for this occasion, and especially this year. Arana nginyani ngindu gada wambarna nginyani ngindu gada Arana nginyani ngindu gada wambarna nginyani ngindu gada ngaji gaga ngaji mingin umana ngengira non galana wanenga gigalana injamara 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 ay wabana garedri ngurme ay welcome.
Thanks for inviting me to be part of this special community celebration, commemoration, thinking about suicide and mental health, and being together at a very difficult time of our history. We think about so much of the moment that divides people and makes us feel alone. And as we pray, as we begin this commemoration, this community memory, prayer, of course, is just a cry from our hearts. And at a time when so many people have been divided, I'd also like to apologise on behalf of religious institutions that when they haven't known the answer to the question has made it up and obviously got it so bloody wrong. And so tonight to think about those people who have informed that prayer, a prayer with all those names on it, like those candles across there, individual people who've lightened up our own darkness. And so today we pray that with their memory ringing through the world, ringing through our hearts, that they connect us in a very special way, that we will change the world, change the way we treat other people, and as a result of their love, their life and their challenge, that love will have the last word. Amen.
Thank you, Father Peter. And sorry if I spoke too soon. Just a reminder that if you are receiving captions by default on Facebook as I'm speaking, and sometimes they may seem a little bit peculiar, you can click on the bottom right-hand screen. There's a little cogwheel. Just click on that and the option is there for you to disable the default caption on Facebook, and that way you will be getting the feed from our own live and non-robotic captioner, so everything will make a lot more sense. It's now my pleasure to introduce Professor Patrick McGorry, and in fact I often forget that he is A, a professor, and B, Patrick. Why? Because he is the most down-to-earth and big-hearted man. I just know him as Pat. I consider him a friend of mine, but it's worth remembering that Professor Patrick McGorry is the founding director, one of the founding directors of Headspace. He's also the executive director of Origin, which is a mental health services hub. He has been an advocate for mental health for many years. He's a former Australian of the Year, and he's been involved in research and advocating for mental health in such areas as homeless, as refugees, asylum seekers, and the youth. And in fact, tonight, with the lockdowns very much present of mind, Patrick will be looking at the effect that COVID-19 has been having across the community and how this, in fact, period of disruption can also be a period of opportunity. It's now my pleasure to introduce Pat McGorry, and after Pat, there will be a surprise singer, a remarkable singer, also too, with her story to share.
Well, hello everyone. It's great to be back at the Winter Solstice I can't say here in Albury Wodonga, but in Albury Wodonga. I was at one of the first of these events, and it was a huge privilege to be invited. And it still is to be invited back. So thank you, Stu and Annette, and I hope everyone's travelling as well as can be expected in these really strange times. I guess, my feeling is that the fear and the disruption and the kind of lives being turned upside down by this pandemic has made everyone much more aware than ever before of the importance of good mental health and what happens if you lose that gift of good mental health. And so we've been thinking a lot about what it means for our society, for our community post COVID-19, and obviously planning, for that recovery period. Now, obviously, the biggest threat has been to people's physical health posed by the virus, but the responses that we have had to take, and it's amazing what Australians have actually done to actually limit the spread of the virus. I think it's been, a real credit to all of us that we've been able to kind of turn back the tide. But it's come at a cost, because the sort of measures that we have taken are actually undermine good mental health, because they cut us off from each other. They restrict our sense of purpose and freedom, our sense of security. People need each other, and we've found it very difficult to, I think, remain in contact with each other during this period. It's kind of had an effect on our confidence about the world and about our safety and about our future. So, separation is one of the big threats to mental health. Loss, if we've lost relatives as a result of the epidemic. All of these things conspire to sort of undermine our mental health. Now, most people are going to be okay. Most people in this sort of situation, a disaster situation, do actually get through it, even though they might be very stressed and worried, or even not feeling that good for a period of time. But we know with every disaster or every crisis like this, there is a surge of new episodes of poor mental health, either in people who have been perfectly okay their whole lives prior to that, if they've been exposed in a certain way, or more commonly, a very big chunk of our society has experienced poor mental health. It's about 20% in any given year, and it's at least half of us, if not more, across the whole of the lifespan. So all of those people are going to be at risk of a relapse or a new episode of poor mental health, and we have to plan for that. And that's something we have been talking to government about, both state and federal. They've both announced initial packages of response. Now, that's very positive that both governments, state and federal, in Victoria and federally, I'm not sure about New South Wales, but hopefully they've done something too. But that's really just an initial stabilisation effort. What we really need is a major investment in a more holistic, compassionate form of mental health care, a system of mental health care, which can be built in the wake of the pandemic. In Victoria, we have a Royal Commission, which is absolutely committed, as is the government, to kind of rebuilding our system. It's important to say that even before the pandemic, we were operating on a very low base in terms of mental health care. Only about a third of the people that needed specialist mental health care were actually able to get it. And the quality of it was a bit variable, as you all know. So low base, different from the physical health system, and a huge challenge coming down the pipe at us. So I think, one of the investments that government, state and federal have to make have to make is in building a system, a 21st century system of modern mental health care, probably powered to some degree by digital and telehealth, because we've learned a lot of things in the crisis from having to adapt in that way, but also having much better face-to-face and more skilled and complex capacity. We also want to draw volunteers and peer workers into that mix as well, so we get that kind of trust and deep understanding of what it's like to experience mental ill health. So I think we've got the building blocks of a really great new system of care if we can get governments to invest and we can create the new workforces to actually to work within these new cultures of care. So I'm feeling pretty optimistic, actually. You might think that that's a bit delusional, but actually, the governments have borrowed a lot of money, so I don't think money is going to be the problem. They will actually worry about debt, I suppose, but interest rates are low, so we have to keep the pressure up on government to make sure this gets done. And I think the money will be available. In Victoria, we have a political commitment that the Royal Commission's recommendations are going to be implemented 100%. So, and I can tell you the design of that new system is going very, very well in our state, at least. So I think I am feeling pretty optimistic, and I think the best insurance policy we can actually create here to make sure that these reforms and this much better situation does actually transpire is if we mobilise our communities, which you do incredibly well in Albury Wodonga, and you're a lesson to every other community around Australia in that respect. It's people power. And we have set up, with Stu and Annette, an organisation called Australians for Mental Health, which is designed to campaign and help governments that are in good faith get the community support they need to actually implement these reforms. And so we have to mobilise hundreds of thousands, even millions of Australians behind this effort to ensure that we actually get equity in healthcare, so people with mental illness get the same access and quality of care that people with COVID-19 have got, or any other physical illness. We just haven't had that. We've never had that in mental health, and people have died in significant numbers as a result. Probably a lot more than will die from the COVID-19 epidemic if you look at it over a longer period of time. We still lose 3,000 people a year to suicide in Australia every year. We lose 8 people a day. And, when you put that against, the viral epidemic, it's in the same ballpark, actually. It's a chronic epidemic. It's a chronic crisis that we haven't responded to. But I think the more personal awareness of the importance of mental health that the COVID-19 epidemic has created in every Australian, I think, is going to help us with that task. If there is an economic downturn, the need for that is going to be even more important, because we know that in recessions and depressions, suicide rates go up. The financial and the other threats to our security really affect people's mental health. So there are so many reasons for doing this, but we are very well positioned in this country to do it. And it partly depends on you, the public, as to how successful that effort actually is, because governments can get distracted, and we've got to make sure they keep their eye on this ball. So, thank you I can't say thank you for coming out, because you haven't come out, you're online, but it's great to be able to connect with you in this way, and wish you all the very best, and stay well, stay safe, and hope we all come through this together.
habit of looking back on all of it and wishing I had done better. Or I just wanna feel it, feel that I like who I'm becoming and feel alright in the quiet. I know the sun don't rise and set above me, and I don't want you to compromise a lot to love me. But if you go, I'll turn on the light for you. If you go, I'm gonna be bright for you. If you go, I've been a little darker than I've been wanting you to see, though you've been coming round needing to be looked after. And I don't have an answer why I've been buried underneath some kind of mountain that I made or some disaster. I know the sun don't rise and set above me, and I don't want you to compromise a lot to love me. But if you go, I'll turn on the light for you. If you go, I'm gonna be bright for you. If you go, I'll tell you something that I've learned as we've been watching people leaving. Oh, the loving that we've earned is gonna keep us breathing. Oh, the loving that we've earned is gonna keep us breathing. It's gonna keep us breathing. It's gonna keep us breathing. Gonna keep us breathing. It's gonna keep us breathing. Oh, keep us breathing. It's gonna keep us breathing. It's gonna keep us.
Thank you, Angie McMahon. Huge fan, and thank you to Pat McGorry as well. Angie, if you haven't sourced her CD, her debut CD, it is called Salt. And in fact, Her YouTube of singing And I Am Woman at the Corner Hotel has had 51,174 views, and I am responsible for 174 of those views. She is a magnetic performer. And in fact, in that album Salt, would you believe there is a song called Pastor? A bit of a theme there. And Angie, in that song, she says that I just sit in my house making noise for fun, and I'm not moving much or proving much to anyone. And almost that, to me, sums up the whole life of isolation that we've all been going through, as much as the life of isolation of an artist, in contrast to the spotlight and the adulation of performance. And in fact, there's something of the truth for all of us in that, the light and the dark, and living with both of those extremes. And in fact, if the content of tonight's Winter Solstice, number 8, has given you any cause for distress, the lifeline number is 13 11 14. It's a 24-hour service, and it is completely discreet and always there, operated by human beings, not by algorithms or a sort of chatbot helpline. Coming up now, it is again something of a double treat. You're about to hear from Helen Haynes, who is the local member for Indi, and she will be reading a Bruce Daw poem. Now, April has been very cruel to us. This April 2020, we lost Bruce Daw, who was a remarkable poet. He was the poet of the people. He was deemed something of a failure, having gone to 7 schools and never really completed too many grades with a flair. Excuse me. And it was only April in 2019 that we lost one of our great patrons of the Australian poetry and Winter Solstice, and that was Les Murray. So 2 champion poets in the space of 12 months. It has been a cruel April, to quote T.S. Eliot. Helen Haynes will be reading a poem called Presences, and Helen, it's worth noting, is not just the local member for Indi, she's also the first independent member federally to be elected after an independent member, so she's a record breaker. She's also a former midwife, and I'd have to say that midwifery and politics, obstetrics and politics, it's all about delivery, and you'll hear her deliver a poem called Presences from the late and lamented Bruce Daw. And after that, you'll hear from Sean Tan, and Sean Tan is the writer and illustrator responsible for, in a way, this red tree behind us, which has become something of a symbol for the winter solstice. Sean is the creator of a book called The Red Tree. He's also the writer behind such works as The Arrival and The Lost Thing, and his animation of The Lost Thing won him an Oscar, in fact, back in 2011. And after Helen reads Bruce Daw, you'll hear from Sean Tan talking about how his illustration work, in a way, is, as he says, strange little whispers that the mind would normally censor. So Helen Haynes reading Bruce Daw's poem, followed by Sean Tan speaking about the power of illustration.
This is a poem by the late Australian poet Bruce Daw. It's called Presences. This is what I would say. Love life, for what is always beyond you. The perfume of a girl who was gone just as you entered the room. The ripple on the bright pool of the fish already steadily swimming elsewhere. The cat's footfall on the purring carpet. The smile on the face that's turned ever so slightly away from you. No insult intended. So that you are never sure what you saw ever really happened. Girl, fish, cat, smile. Until the very last, when you know, and the pencil falls blunted.
Okay, I'm going to try and draw a picture of the main character from my picture book, The Red Tree, which is very relevant to the Winter Solstice event for a number of reasons, and it's an honour to be able to participate this year in an online capacity from my own winter bunker. I started thinking about The Red Tree in my early 20s. I didn't know what it was, but I had this idea for a book about particularly negative feelings of loneliness, inability to do things, sometimes the inability to be inspired. I was always very interested in finding use in feelings that I thought might actually be quite useless, including those feelings of depression. And when I was young, they were quite a big part of my life, starting out and not really being particularly successful in the arts, or even understanding what I was doing myself. And and the loneliness of the profession can sometimes creep up on you, and if you don't take care of it, and I would find myself feeling quite lost. But that became the inspiration for a number of stories, including the lost thing and the one that followed immediately after it, the red tree. It felt honest and truthful. There wasn't any sort of false attempt to be happy or therapeutic. It was just meant to be a representation of this is what it feels like to be very unhappy and very unmotivated. And without having to come up with any solution of how to deal with that, I thought, hey, I feel better already just from representing it in an honest way, just being open and honest and saying, hey, sometimes things are like this. It's very confusing. Nobody understands you. You think that it's a permanent state that's going to last forever and everything is pointless. And there's some small rational part of your mind that says, hey, this is a temporary thing and it's going to pass, as all things do. But the actual other voices that kind of creep in are also saying the exact opposite, and that's really part of the problem. The most rewarding thing about working on this particular project was the reception from those people who had suffered all sorts of difficult situations, much worse than anything I'd suffered myself, who found a great deal of relief in looking at these strange pictures of a mouthless girl experiencing all different incomprehensible situations, and recognizing that hope can take all sorts of forms and starts with a recognition that something exists in the first place, both the sadness and the possibility of happiness. That's the hardest thing to see sometimes when you're feeling that low, is the possibility of that change. When it does happen, it has such a powerful corrective force over your whole understanding of the universe. A very simple thing it can be too sometimes. Very simple change.
Sean Tan. A few people have been asking on Facebook where we are broadcasting from, live streaming from. It is in the Epic Studios in Pran, and in fact it is a really epic winter solstice. Great to have you with us. First time we've ever done it in a studio. Normally we are shivering our little buns off in the Queen Elizabeth II Square in Albury, but tonight here we are in the comfort of a studio, and I hope that you are comfortable at home, as well as taking on some of these very important messages and some extraordinary performances as well. We've had over 700 people join us, which is something of a record. I think we can do 1,000 now if we keep pushing. Tell your friends that's on. We still have some two great speakers coming up. And we've had people from Vietnam, a big shout out to you there, Berlin, Townsville, Tasmania, right across the country and right across the world. And this is a real treat coming up. His name is Johnny Benjamin. He is a UK advocate for mental health. He is a broadcaster, he's a blogger, he's an activist, and in fact he has been the prime mover behind an organisation called Think Well, which is a mental health program for high schools. That's in the UK. He's also too has launched a charity last year called Beyond Shame, Beyond Stigma, again in the name of mental health. He's the author of 2 books. They include The Book of Hope and A Stranger, or The Stranger on the Bridge, which in fact touches on and hints at the very personal story and quite troubling story he's about to share with you. And after Johnny, there will be another mystery singer with a bit more of a local connection, and she also has an extraordinary personal story to share, as well as a performance that you are really going to relish. So Johnny, and then our mystery singer.
I'm Johnny Benjamin, and I'm in London, UK at the moment. I was meant to be in Australia at this point, but because of the coronavirus, of course, I'm I've had to cancel my trip. I'm gutted because I was so looking forward to being part of the Winter Solstice, and it was meant to be my first trip to Australia. But, you know, I will make it. I will make it there for sure. But I feel very privileged to be part of this. And for me, mental health and suicide is something that, well, it's something that's been a massive part of my life, my journey. I mean, my own mental health issues started very young. So I was 5 when my parents first took me to a child psychologist. I think we all knew from a young age that I wasn't like a typical kid. I always felt really different to everyone around me growing up in school, and yeah, I found it difficult. I mean, I was doing well in my schoolwork and exams, but I don't know, I always found like being around people, I found it hard. I think I really began to suffer when I was in my mid-teens. I used to get these horrendous low periods, and I just didn't understand what was going on. We didn't talk about mental health or anything like that when I was growing up. I just thought, well, I thought it would somehow pass, and this was something I needed to deal with myself, and I didn't want people to know what was going on. I was embarrassed, like most people. I was really embarrassed. And for me, I thought I could run away from everything in my head. So I ran away when I was 17 to Manchester, and then 18. Anyway, I went away to the north of England, to Manchester, to study. I thought that would be a fresh start for me, and it would solve all this stuff in my head. But it didn't, and things got worse. When I moved away from my family and my friends, and I ended up having a psychotic breakdown when I was 20. And at that point, I was put into a psychiatric hospital, and I was given a diagnosis, which is schizoaffective disorder. It's like a combination of schizophrenia and bipolar. And that for me was, it felt like the end when I got that diagnosis and when I was put into hospital. So as well, for me, I was really struggling with my sexuality as well, and I come from a Jewish family, and yeah, being gay it was extremely tough. And a month into my stay in this psychiatric hospital, I snapped. I literally snapped. Hit something in my head, snapped. And I was like, can't do this anymore. Just too painful. And at that point, I said, I'm going to run away from the hospital. I'm going to go to a bridge, and that's it. There was just no other way. There seemed no other way to resolve what was going on. And yeah, I ended up running away from the hospital, and I went to a bridge, and I went on the edge. For me, I wasn't on the edge for very long when this stranger came along, and he stood next to me, and he just, I don't know, he just began to talk, and I didn't want him there. I just wanted to be left alone, but there was something about him. He was just so grounded and present and like open and really just patient with me. I hadn't experienced an interaction like this before. In the hospital where I was on the suicide ward, as they called it. You know, I was observed all the time, 24/7, and people just would observe. They didn't talk, they just observed. But there was just something so different about this guy that was next to me on the bridge. He just he wanted to listen and to help. And I mean, for me, we talked. I felt safe. I didn't feel judged. I think that was the key. I didn't feel judged at all with this guy. But I think it was him saying to me, he said, "Mate, you'll be all right." Just really casually and confidently and just so positively. He just, you know, he said, "You'll be all right, mate. You'll get through this." And I don't know, it was hearing that from someone that kind of changed something in me on that bridge. Eventually, this stranger convinced me to go for a coffee, and we were about to go, and he helped me off the edge to the pavement, the sidewalk, and someone had called the police, and the police charged in, and they separated us. But what that stranger did, in his words, they'd had an impact on me, and I felt a bit of hope, I think, you know, from this guy being so positive with me. I felt a bit of hope, and that hope, well, I mean, that hope started off like a tiny seed, and eventually grew. It took a long time, and for me, you know, it's an ongoing journey. I have my relapses, but it's different. It is different today. It's I guess I talk about it now today. I don't hide it anymore, and actually now I ask for help now, which has taken me a long time to do. But you know, I take my medication today, and I have therapy. I use different techniques. So this is, I like to show how mindfulness works in this jar. This jar, as you can see, it's full of glitter. And the glitter is kind of like my mind or our minds. It can be so full and cluttered and overwhelming at times, but the mindfulness or meditation, yoga, it just settles stuff for me in my head, and I get finally some peace of mind. And I mean, just to know that I can find some peace of mind, even if things are really messy in my head, it makes a big difference. But the thing that helps me most of all is Well, something my therapist said to me a couple of years ago. He said, you know, Johnny, he said, it's not your fault, it's the way that your brain is wired. And yeah, it really helped when he said that. You know, we separate our heads from the rest of us, you know, our mind and our body, we separate it. I think one day we'll stop doing that. And my particular message is always, you know, what happens in here, in the brain, is no different to what happens anywhere else. And, you know, if something happens in your body, if you have a heart attack, you don't hide it. You don't try and push it away. You'll get help straight away. And why do we treat our heart differently from our head? That's my kind of message. I do a lot of work with young people. My biggest passion is getting through to young people. If I'd have got something at school, I think things would have been different. But I think the thing that I'm most kind of proud of is a few years ago, I decided to find that guy on the bridge that stopped me. And I launched an online search, social media, and it just kind of took off. And the amazing thing was we were reunited, which was just, well, it was just incredible, you know, to be able to thank him for what he did that day. And then we've since gone on to work together, and we've spoken at places around the world, and I've written books and made films, and yeah, things are really different today. But I think for me, the key thing is being part of humanity, really feeling like part of humanity, especially I think during this time, coronavirus. And I mean, of course, in Australia, you know, you've been through so much with the virus, and then before that, the fires at the start of this year, and humanity really being there for one another is just so important. And this is why, you know, I was so looking forward to the winter solstice, because it's all about community. And I just wanted to say thank you for letting me be a part of it. It's a real privilege, and next year, I want to be there next year. Until then, thank you, and take care, and look after yourselves and look after each other.
Hey, my name's Liv Cartledge. This is a song I wrote called Rogue Dog. The winter solstice is a very important event. I'm very humbled to be a part of it again. Reasons. In 2014, I lost my dad to suicide. More recently, I had my own battles with mental health. This song's about that. I am a dry twig on a train tracking land. I am a rogue dog on a winding road to sand, and I breathe heavy. I take it all in. I break boundaries and play games I can't win. I
What a voice, what a talent. Liv Cartledge from Beechworth, and a really heartrending story as well. Thank you, Liv. And if you'd like to find out more about Liv's work, her EP with that same chocolate voice is called Timber, and the name of that song was called Rogue Dog. Looking at the Facebook feed here at the Winter Solstice number 8, there's been some remarkable comments and really supportive comments as well. We thank you for that. Also too, a lot of response to Johnny Benjamin's speech. It was pretty harrowing, was it not? And incredible to think about the difference that that stranger on the bridge made to Johnny. And in fact, if you'd like to know more about that, there is a film based on that called The Stranger on the Bridge that you can seek out. And the book, of course, about Johnny's life is also goes by the same title. It's what's called buying time. It's something that I've come across through Steve Ellen, who is a professor of psychiatry here in Melbourne. And he talks about that effect that a barrier on a cliff top or a stranger who intervenes there on a bridge can make that critical difference. It's about interaction, it's about conversation, it's about reaching out to give that person pause. It's about what tonight is about. We don't, so often we presume that everyone is coping when in fact so often the opposite is the case, and we need to make sure that everyone around us is okay, and we need to be very honest about ourselves as well, and to tell those strangers on bridges or friends very close to us that we're not coping, that we need some help. And there is help available through the likes of Headspace and Origin, and I've mentioned the Lifeline number, which is 13 11 14, but beyond Blue, many other services are available, and please reach out if you are feeling distressed in any way. We're getting up to 760 views. We're doing really well. I am ambitious, thinking we might get up to 1,000, but I know by the magnifier effect with everyone sharing this that we can reach that number. And also too, there will be an Auslan version of this same event available next week that will be put together by Jess Slauson and her colleagues as well. Looking forward to that. And this whole event will be available for you to stream, as much as the comments will go on after the event itself is concluded. So where are we going next? Well, from Rogue Dog to, I have to say, one of the champion lions of Australian sport. She is a phenomenal athlete. She is Lauren Jackson, an Albury local. And in fact, I had tried to memorise her statistics, and they're pretty difficult. But I'm just going to have to glance at my notes because the credits are incredible. She has won 6 WNBL championships. 4 of those seasons, she was the most valuable player in those. She's also won 2 WNBA championships, and she was the 3 times most valuable player in the most competitive women's basketball league in the world, and she also was in the 8 All-Star teams. She's won 3 EuroLeague championships. Do you see a theme here? She is a dynamic player. And also too, what's incredible is her record when it comes to Olympics. 3 Olympic medals. She's also won a gold medal at the Commonwealth Games. There's no question about her talent. And in fact, the Albury Sports Stadium is named as the Lauren Jackson Sports Centre. However, with the Olympics now in limbo thanks to COVID-19, a lot of athletes are going through some very difficult times, and a lot of athletes, with all their bling and trophies and showcases and medallions, have often got darker sides to their character. That obsessive nature can sometimes hide a darker nature, and it's something that Lauren Jackson very candidly and very courageously has confronted, because in the end, it ain't about the bling, it's all about the health of heart and mind and how it can sing. This is Lauren Jackson, and after that we'll hear back from Northern Folk in their slimmed down version of 9 into 6, singing a song called Jacarandas.
My experience with mental health has been a bit of a journey, really. I definitely had to deal with levels of anxiety, high levels of anxiety when I was a kid, that sort of presented more as a bit of separation anxiety from my mum. But you know, as I sort of got a little bit older, so 10, 11, 12, and I was touring with representative teams, I would really struggle. Like they stopped selecting me for representative teams because I could not compete at the level that they needed me to compete at, because quite often I'd be crying myself to sleep on the road if my parents weren't there. I'd be just so worked up that I couldn't actually function normally. So this was when I was a kid. So I guess for me, having to deal with that when I was that young, it was difficult because I knew that as a basketball player, if I wanted to be, you know, the greatest, I would have to travel and I'd have to sort of be away from my parents. So there was a lot of sort of work that I had to do on myself when I was a kid, before I even started this journey, which was incredible, but you know, it was hard. So I might start there. I headed overseas when I was 19 to play in the WNBA in America. And then women's sport, it's one of those things where we don't get paid millions and millions of dollars per season. We have to play year round to make money to be able to survive being a professional athlete. So for me, my journey was sort of set. I knew that once I went over to the WNBA, I'd be playing a season in Australia, I'd be playing with the national team over in Europe whenever we got opportunities. And then when the opportunities presented itself, I would eventually go and play over in Europe or China for a little bit of extra cash in the off season. So I guess I'd always had a little bit of anxiety traveling. I hated being away from home, as I sort of said earlier, but I had worked on that stuff and I sort of found ways of controlling that to a degree, but I was always uncomfortable, but it was just something that I had to deal with. And, you know, I was being contracted to be an athlete and compete, and that's what I did. In about 2008, I had been, at this time, I'd been traveling from America straight to Russia or South Korea, and then back to America, and then, you know, world championships or an Olympics. So if I was coming back to Australia, it may have been for 1 or 2, you know, weeks at a time. So I really didn't have time to focus on my body, on my mental health. And my life felt like it was crumbling around me when I was overseas. And I mean, to the point where I just couldn't breathe. I woke up one morning and I'd lost 20 kilos. We'd just lost the gold medal. We'd won the silver medal at Beijing Olympics, and I had to fly home that following day. And my parents picked me up from the airport and I couldn't speak. I just had this knot in my stomach that was like, I could not even, whenever I tried to talk or tried to start a conversation with my parents, I'd just start crying. I couldn't eat, and I just got deeper and deeper into this sort of well. I had to have surgery on my ankle because it had sort of flared up. And so I knew that I only had sort of a week or 2 at home to recover from that before I had to head overseas again. And Mum and Dad ended up taking me down to the South Coast because they were so worried about me. They didn't want to leave me at my apartment in Sydney alone. So they took me down to their home in Turos Head and basically just waited. You know, they just sat in the house and waited for me to come out and talk to them. And often, I mean, for the first week, it really was about 4 o'clock when we could have a vino on the deck, and I could just sit there and then feel okay, feel a bit relaxed, and then start talking again. And I mean, this probably happened for 3 or 4 days, and I didn't get out of bed for any other reason other than that. And then, you know, slowly but surely I started talking, I started going out fishing with them, and things, you know, started to look up. Unfortunately, I had to head back to Russia. And once I did that, you know, we had to go over there for the money. The money was so good and I couldn't say, no, I'm not doing it. So went over there, and within a couple of weeks, I just sort of pitted out again. I was at rock bottom, on antidepressants and just trying to get through. I spent 7 months over in Russia that year, and I just kept losing weight. I was in a really destructive relationship, and I've never been that low in my life. So how I coped, how I got through, I do not know. Because those were the days too where it was middle of winter in Russia. Sun wouldn't come up till 10 o'clock in the morning, and we'd already been in the gym by that point, and then the sun would go down by 2. So I'd get home from training, I'd go straight to bed, and then I'd get back up and it was dark again, and then I'd be back into training. So living with that kind of depression and anxiety, and I mean, it was a time in my life that it could have gone one way or the other. And for me, fortunately, I knew that once I got out of Russia, I had to start doing some serious work on myself, and be comfortable with myself alone, on my own. And that's what I did. So from then on, I really made a commitment to myself to be focused on, I guess, never getting that low again, never doing that to my parents again, never shutting them out. And because that's sort of what happened. You know, in my career, I just sort of focused on basketball and, you know, the relationship that I was in at the time, and I didn't focus on the things that I needed to be healthy and well, which was, it was a real learning experience for me. So anyway, that was probably one of my darkest times. And being an athlete too, especially back then, we didn't talk about this stuff. This wasn't something that I felt comfortable talking about to anybody, because I felt like it was a weakness that would impact my contracts, how people saw me, the stigma of mental health. But I just couldn't cope, and I was not dealing well. And fortunately, I had our Australian doctor at the time who saw that, and he sort of put his hand up to help, and really made an effort just to keep talking to me and keep that dialogue open, even when I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. I couldn't even talk to my closest friends. So that was a time in my life that as much as I get really upset thinking about it and talking about it, it actually helped me grow into the person that I am today, and finding coping mechanisms, and also knowing that my parents and the people that I love, when they're close to me, this doesn't happen. So I really have relied very heavily on them. And yeah, I think that's given me the opportunity to sort of succeed post-sport. So moving on, sort of 2012-ish, my body started breaking down, and it's been very well documented that, particularly in the last few years of my career, you know, I had many surgeries. I think I had close to 15 on my knee. I'd been taking a lot of prescription medication just to deal with pain. You know, I'd sort of get an operation on my knee, and then I'd go back and train. And things were really kind of, it was hard, because all I was doing was training, going to bed, getting up, training, going to bed, because my knee was so painful that I just couldn't do anything else. And I didn't want to do anything else. So I sort of got stuck in a bit of a really vicious cycle where, you know, I was taking prescription medication to train. After training, my knee would get sore, so there'd be more prescription medication. Then I wouldn't be able to sleep, so I'd have to take sleeping pills to go to bed, and then get up and train again. So I was in a pretty bad cycle, and this went on for a couple of years, and that definitely deteriorated my mental health as well. I found that once I retired, once I made the decision to quit the game because of the injuries, I made a decision to quit the prescription medication as well, and all of a sudden I was out of this fog that I feel like I was in for probably 20 years. So that to me was a really big lesson as well, that prescription medication for me was just a no-no, and having to, again, find my happiness and find what motivates me and inspires me to live each day to the fullest has got nothing to do with medication of any type. So that was my journey, and that has definitely brought me to this place now. And to be able to talk about it, it's frightening, but it's also, I'm glad that I get to share this with you, because it was not all rosy at all. So anyway, post basketball, I had two little boys, which they're everything, and I finally feel complete. You know, in fact, I feel more complete than I ever did as an athlete, and I was always longing for something and wanting more. And once I had my first child, I knew straight away that I was meant to be a mum, and this was probably, you know, what I was longing for so long, which it's sort of weird and cliche to say that, but I found that focusing on myself for so long and making sure that I was had the perfect preparation for every game or every training, I got so sick of worrying about myself that being able to focus and devote all my time and attention to my kids is the best thing that I could ever possibly do. So I feel really fortunate to be able to share this as well with them. This isolation time at the moment, it's an interesting time, and I really feel for a lot of athletes. I think that particularly female basketballers and soccer players or whoever going overseas, going to different countries and playing, you're often isolated on your own in your own apartment between trainings and games, and you don't speak the language, you're away from home. So I feel like we've probably lived isolation to the fullest, but in saying that, the athletes at the moment, what they're going through, having to improvise their trainings, having to be at home and not getting ready for Tokyo at the moment, I can't imagine how they're coping. And, I guess if I had any advice at all, it would be just to stay moving, like try and get out and walk, try and just keep moving as much as you possibly can, keep your mind thinking, get online, do a course, do something. I mean, as athletes too, it's often we don't take breaks when we need to. So a forced break, as much as it's painful and it's hard, it could be doing your body a world of good. So, I mean, if you look at it from that light, but you just got to try and stay connected, try and stay moving. I really just feel for you guys, and I hope you're all good.
We're the Northern Folk. This is Jacarandas.
In spring the jacarandas bloom and hailstorms make me think of you. It's all a little quieter when you leave. Well, I paint my heart on the fence and wait and watch it dry. I sit and try to brush away the thought you're still not satisfied. Your morning kiss over coffee started feeling like goodbye. I saw the jacarandas die, and all of my body aches for your body. Still I tell nobody what I know, and all of the reasons I stay quiet and no longer believe them. These are the few things that I know. If early skies are stained with red, the fisherman will stay in bed. I hope the hail makes you think of me. Nothing makes me miss you more than peach gray clouds and all your flaws. Colors all feel tighter when you leave. When you leave, I wake later in the day. My nights burn out in the train. When you leave me, I run out of things to say. When you leave,
Wonderful to hear from Northern folk who have been playing at the Winter Solstice for several years now, and it's great to see that group burgeon. And if you'd like to find out more, their third EP, or their third album in fact, is called Watermark. And so much love for Lauren Jackson. It was an extraordinarily courageous and honest speech, and I'm sure it has surprised many of you that behind these champion figures such as Lauren, there is a lot of frailty and a lot of darkness essentially. And hopefully tonight something like Winter Solstice can share a little bit of light upon these issues and make a difference. And in fact, it's great to see that on the comments page there at Facebook, Patrick McGorry, who was one of our first speakers, wonderful Professor Pat McGorry, is part of the thread, and he did make the point that many athletes have this sort of, are living with these sorts of mental conditions, and we should be more aware of this, that even the so-called champions around us are vulnerable. We're all vulnerable. That's the spirit of Winter Solstice, and this is all in aid of supporting each other, those who have been affected by suicide, and looking at the numbers with something like 8 a day in Australia. That's got to be pretty much everyone in the room and in the chat room as well. Our hearts go out to you, and I'm hoping that tonight the Winter Solstice has made a really positive difference. It's extraordinary to see that we've had over 800 viewers, which is wonderful, and of course the magnifier effect is also exponential with the likes of Wodonga Senior Secondary School sharing us. Great to have you guys on board. Also too with ABC Goulburn Murray, a big shout out to you as well for being great supporters. We've had the likes of Dubai and Canada also join us, along with Berlin and Tasmania and Vietnam as well, around the world. Now, a face that will be very familiar to you, and by the way, stick around because we do have an astonishing live act to finish with. Enough of the pre-records. We have got a live act here in the studio. I'm very thrilled to introduce our last performer. But first, a really wonderful chance to catch up with former Commissioner Shane Fitzsimmons. And you'll know Shane, his face was very familiar on all TVs for reasons of the cataclysmic start to 2020. With the fires across most parts of the state, New South Wales and Victoria. And just as when you thought that 2020 couldn't get any worse, of course, we've now are living with a pandemic. It has been a very challenging year for many people, but Shane no least of all. In fact, when he was the Fire Commissioner for New South Wales, he's only just stepped down in April, he said this. He said that I have seen much this past fire season, the worst that Mother Nature can deliver, and I've also seen the very best in our people. So when hardship strikes, it does bring out the best in us, and that's a tribute to Australians and to human nature. It's wonderful to hear Shane speaking with us tonight in a different capacity. He did step down, as I say, from the Fire Commission in April and has taken on an extraordinary role with the New South Wales Government. It's called the Commissioner of Resilience. And when you think about what 2020 has presented so far, 6 months in, it makes sense that we do need someone who can help us, enable us essentially for more crisis, or even just getting over the crises that we are currently negotiating. So he is a remarkable speaker. He will be with you for about 5 minutes, and then it will be my pleasure to wrap and introduce our final performer. But if you could make a chance, give space, enjoy that glühwein. This is Shane Fitzsimmons.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to join you tonight on this very special winter solstice for 2020. What a time, what a season, what a period we've had here in New South Wales. We've had communities right across New South Wales with extraordinary drought conditions building over the last couple of years, culminating in the conditions that led to the worst ever bushfire experience we've had in New South Wales. More than 5.5 million hectares destroyed, 26 lives lost, and we've seen damage and destruction extending from the Queensland border all the way down to the Victorian border, with communities razed to the ground literally. Just under 2,500 homes destroyed, and billions of dollars in infrastructure, livelihoods, businesses destroyed by the fires. Of course, on top of the fires, we've also seen localised floods and storms that have compounded things even further. And now we've just got these widespread implications of the COVID-19 response effort, and what are the triggers and the mechanisms to get us returning to a post-COVID impact environment where we can start returning to business, to social inclusion, to connectedness in a safe way, in a productive way going forward. No matter who you are, what we've experienced in the last 6 to 12 months has got to take a toll. It takes a toll on all of us. As someone who was personally involved in so many ways with the last fire season particularly, I visited lots of area. I caught up with lots of local community members, volunteers, families, community leaders. Everybody has been touched and affected, and we've all got our own stories, we've all got our own experiences, and the way the fires, the way the disasters have affected us is going to be very different to each and every one of us. But what we all share in is grief and concern and despair, and that's normal. And as a matter of fact, I've got more concern for those people that think they've gone through this season and everything's okay, because it simply isn't. But what is okay is to acknowledge and recognise that we're all in this together, that there is hope, there is support. One of the most powerful things we can do is openly talk to each other, talk to our families, talk to our loved ones, talk to our friends, talk to our mates in our local brigade or our local community, because we are all experiencing this together, and it is okay to have those conversations. It's critically important to have those conversations because it hurts us all in different ways. But what I would plead with everybody is to acknowledge and recognise that there's renewal, there's recovery. Most importantly, there's hope. There's hope for all of us because the community now more than ever needs us all to come together, figuratively speaking in the COVID world of course, but come together in a time when we need to pull together the most. We need to look out for each other. We need to look out for strangers. We need to look out for neighbours. We need to look out for mates. We saw the very worst of Mother Nature over the last 6 to 12 months, but at the same time, we saw the very best in humanity. We saw the very best in love and support and care and giving that we don't want to lose. And whilst we talk very much at the moment about social distancing, I don't like the phrase social distancing. What we're talking about is physical distancing. And physical distancing is necessary to be operating in a COVID-safe environment. But that doesn't mean we should be lonely, we should be isolated, we should be struggling. Now more than ever, make that phone call, send that message, but follow up. Ask, are you okay? How you're travelling? And most importantly, pause and wait for the response, listen to the response and follow up with the questions. We all need to know that we're doing this together. We all need to know that we're experiencing these challenges together, albeit in different ways, in different experiences, different personal situations, but together we can work with one another, we can support one another, and if we need to, we can reach out and get access to those professional services if we want to use them and access them. It is really important for some, but most importantly, what's most important for most is to know that what we're going through is normal, is acceptable, and no one judges us for the challenges we're experiencing. It is really, really critical. So on this winter solstice, I would simply say, look out for each other, look out for yourself. While you're asking how others are going, ask the person in the mirror, are you going okay? And if you're thinking to yourself, no, I'm not, put your hand up, talk to somebody, because now more than ever, we need you. We've got hope, we've all got hope. We're seeing renewal, we're seeing recovery, we're seeing record amounts of programs of support and assistance being made available, people on the ground, online services. They're there for a reason. We want people to use them. We want people to get through. We want people in their community to rebuild and flourish beyond what we've been experiencing for the last 6 months. Have a wonderful evening, but most importantly, look out for each other. It matters now more than ever before.
Thank you, Shane, the new New South Wales Commissioner of Resilience. And resilience, it's a very important word, but it's often misunderstood. We think about resilience of a squash ball. That idea of close impact, tight impact means that you recover without change. But it's very different in the human setting, where resilience really is not rebounding, but it's about recovering. And I came across a great definition of resilience. In fact, it was put out by the Australian Temperament Foundation that said it's not about leaping back, as the roots of the word would suggest, but it's about a capacity to adapt in order to maintain your core values. And on that, Rebecca Solnit, S-O-L-N-I-T, a wonderful American essayist, calls emergency as a state of accelerated phase. It's an accelerated phase of life. It's a little bit like the John Keats idea of emergency being the veil of soul making. Dark times and depression, they can be all engulfing, but if you can get through, when we can get through as a community, reaching out and helping each other, it's that same dark passage of the mind that can also be about you adapting and maintaining that core value of self and being stronger for surviving, coming out the other side. Well, we have come out of the other side of Winter Solstice, number 8. It's great to have your company. It's now my chance to thank all the keynote speakers, the performers, those involved, and a big shout out to all the committee there at Vicky's house. We have been missing you guys, but thank you for being with us. And all of you across Facebook as well, over 1,000 listeners, fantastic, and thanks for joining us tonight. I'd also be remiss not to mention Helen Newman from Nomad Films, at Stodge as well from the Flying Fruit Fly Circus. We've got the live stream wizardry as well from Will Whiten, and a big shout out to Jason from Bradley Reporting, and Gemma for helping out with social media, but everyone who's been involved. It has been a Herculean effort, and we really thank you very much. All of you there listening in, and the comments have been nothing short of inspiring from you as well. So thank you for that. So it's now my opportunity as the MC, and thank you for allowing me here into your tablet to introduce our final performer. Her name is Jess Hitchcock. And in fact, she has had an absolutely monumental year in 2019. She is an opera singer by training. She's a songwriter, composer, and in fact, she's originally from the Saibai Island, which has a population of 701. So talk about kind of growing out of your humble beginnings. Jess has been the winner of the Broadway World Award for her role as Alice in Deborah Cheatham's incredible opera called Pecan Summer. And 2019, I mentioned it was monumental. Jess, in that year, not only was the backup singer helping out Kate Miller-Heidke there at the Eurovision Song Contest in 2019 in Israel, also too, she helped out a certain singer called Paul Kelly, singing your Every Day My Mother's Voice, that was a massive hit with Jess's incredible vocals as part of that. She won in the same year the Smuggler of Light Indigenous Music and Media Award, and just in case you think that she might be falling short of her expectations, she also brought out her debut album, which is called Bloodline. However, the song you're about to hear has been pretty much spontaneously written, and it's not from Bloodline, but Jess is also a standout because she is our very real live performer here at the Epic Studios in Pran. It's now my pleasure to introduce Jess Hitchcock, and to thank you all for your support and helping us see Winter Solstice number 8 become a reality, even if we aren't freezing in Albury. Here we are, just breezing and reaching so many more people here on Facebook. So thank you for your support, and now please enjoy the mesmerising talents of Jess Hitchcock. Thank you, and I'll catch you next year.
Thanks so much, David. This song I wrote for a young 13-year-old Aboriginal girl who tried to commit suicide a few years ago, and I'd just like to dedicate this song to all of the kids in our Short Black Opera's children's choir, Dungala Children's Choir, who lost one of their own to suicide this year as well.
We're not going very far. I have something I need to tell you. Though I'm young, I feel I've lived 1,000 years. Every breath I'm taking is hard. There are many people walking with us. I know this now from what I've seen. Don't let fear
You have many things to say. You can find your voice in your own way. There is an end, but don't let it come too soon. You have all the strength inside of you. There are days when it will all seem too hard, but don't you let it bring you down. Don't let fear take you now. Don't let it all come crashing down. We've lived 1,000 lives upon this land, and we're stronger than you think. You can call on the memories. They're there waiting to lead you by the hand. Take a walk. We're not going very far. I want to hear your story now. Though you're young, I see you've lived 1,000 years. Just know